Welcome to Face2Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face2Face. So my guest today is Tanya Cothron. She's the co-editor of a new book called Smart Risks with Jennifer Lunfer, who also appeared as a guest on Face2Face a couple of years ago. The subtitle of the book is How Small Grants Are Helping to Solve Some of the World's Biggest Problems. A very interesting book, beautifully written, edited, pieced together in a way that is readable and makes sense, rooted in narrative, rooted in story. It's a great read for anybody interested in, solving some of the world's biggest problems. Quote on the back says from Jennifer and Peter Buffett, every, quote, philanthropist committed to supporting meaningful, transformative change should read this book, close quote. Tanya and I had a great time. We talked about travel and about being the child of hippie parents and how that made such a difference for her. We talk about just the wealth of experiences that we have from around the planet and being an artist in other contexts and what that actually means for us. We talk about peace building and about change and about measurement and about things like mutual trust. And believe it or not, we actually have an interesting conversation about mattresses, which makes it into the book, kind of gets its own chapter. This is about grassroots. This is about bottom up kind of meeting and working with that top down approach. Don't forget face2facelive.ca for more interviews. Toronto International Film Festival is coming up very soon. davidpecklive.com for more information about my speaking and writing, and of course rabble.ca for more access to other podcasters as well. Tanya Cothron coming right up, talking about smart risks. Well, welcome to Face2Face. We're joined by another very special guest today. I'm not actually sure what number interview we're at, but we're at about 310, I think. So it's a very special guest here today with us. Tanya Cothron is here to talk about her new book, Smart Risks. Tanya, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It always amazes me that I'm able to get one more guest that's willing to speak with me. It's So thanks for that. So Smart Risks is the title of the book, How Small Grants Are Helping to Solve Some of the World's Biggest Problems. You're the executive administrator of Spirit in Action International, and they're an organization out of California. You live in Toronto, and clearly are concerned about international development. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. I think my interest in international development actually started with an interest in travel. Traveled with my parents, who are artists, when I was a kid, including to South Africa and Zimbabwe, and just seeing the wealth of experiences that people have around the planet sort of sparked my imagination and fascination. And that wasn't, professional at any point. I mean, at that point. And I went to school for sustainable agriculture and geography, and through that.
So kind of related to travel.
Yeah, exactly. Geography, I know where to look on a map.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Where are the Federated States of Micronesia is the question.
Oh, geez.
The only reason I know is because I interviewed somebody recently about that. So
down by the Philippines?
Yeah, it's way over on that side of the world. Yes.
Yeah. Way over on that side of the corner of the map.
Yeah.
And so I think with that travel and with the sustainable agriculture, I saw just the many ways that poverty could be addressed, ways that people were working to change systems, to grow more food, to change, food systems. and then how people were also experiencing art and weaving that into their daily lives.
So, yeah, tell me more about that. So were your parents artists? Were you?
Yeah, my parents are book artists. They make paper and hand-bind books. Do letterpress printing. So it's kind of craft art.
Yeah.
And
very cool.
So they were invited to South Africa and Zimbabwe to teach paper making. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was cool. So I was only in middle school at that point. So I was pretty young.
Yep.
But yeah, that introduced me to sort of a whole new world, and again, it was something that was not maybe getting ahead of myself, but it wasn't that sort of poverty porn of like, we're going to travel so we can save people. It was like, hey, let's go and like collaborate and teach art, and let's, recognize that everyone is a full human being and has interests just like we have. So it wasn't.
So you kind of started out with that sort of holistic, inclusive worldview.
Sort of unconsciously though.
Yeah.
That wasn't sort of the aim of it, but
my guess is my guess would be, and tell me if I'm right or wrong here, or let's unpack this together, but your parents probably raised you in a pretty inclusive environment. I mean, artists tend to have that, I don't know, open sort of approach to the world, that sense of mystery and wonder.
They're like
right?
Full on California hippies. So
right.
They are always the ones to invite anyone to come over and,
So would you, if you were doing like, I don't know, some sort of linear dot connecting thing, would you go back to that first trip and say, you know what, it kind of started for me there? Or was it earlier than that, even this desire to I don't know, include others, to see, to look for other ways of, solving some of the world's biggest problems?
I mean, that was one of my biggest first sort of new experiences like that sort of shook me out of my world of, California Central Coast. And my grandparents were also very involved in international peace building, sort of praying for peace and that sort of aspect of bringing people together. And so that, was also sort of in the background of my childhood. So
do you think it was? Do you think it was stories? Do you think it was people? Do you think it was individuals that maybe you met that had such an impact on you that's what stuck with you? You've taken away certain memories, or was it just sort of this overarching sense? Wow, this world is a big, remarkable place.
Yeah, the last one. I mean, I'm continually amazed by. Wow, there's so many different experiences going on at the same time. And I just got back actually from Ethiopia, Kenya, and Malawi. And so thinking those experiences, the rural people there are having their daily experiences. And then here in Toronto, I'm having my daily experience of being on the subway and in the city. And then, people in each place in rural Vermont, they're having their daily experience, and it's good. Somewhere in between. And so I just get, I get excited.
Yeah, well, you know what? You gave me goosebumps actually, because it's the kind of thing that you really, I mean, you see it online, you see it in film, but you don't really get a sense for it, I don't think, until you're on the ground and you can smell it and taste it and feel it and really, experience it face to face.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to be able to do that, and I feel it's a huge privilege to be able to do that traveling.
So you and Jennifer Lentfer, who I've actually also interviewed a couple of years ago, we met at a conference in D.C., I believe, called Interaction, and we just kind of hit it off right out of the gate. And I don't know, it took us a few months to make it work. And I'm gonna, while we're talking, I'm gonna try to figure out what number interview it was, but it was a few hundred ago, I think. So you guys have come together and you've edited this book, Smart Risks, and you've also contributed to it. So it's a collection. Would you say it's a collection of articles or essays or case studies? What
they're sort of like short essays and stories. We tried to really take a storytelling angle to it rather than a reporting or case study approach.
Right.
And that's very much Jennifer's passion as well. So.
Right, and she's done it. She's got a blog, and I think still does, called, or it used to be called, How Matters. She was very much concerned about measurement and how things were actually unfolding on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think the tagline is it's not what we do, but how we do it.
Right.
So it's really looking at, again, let's not just do it one way that everyone's done before.
Yeah.
Any way.
It seems to me, and I would imagine Jennifer and I probably talked along these lines, but it seems to me over the years of being kind of involved in the field as well in a variety of ways that we seem to be hypnotized by numbers, and we love to measure what's easy and not necessarily what's meaningful. And I don't know if that's because we don't have the tools to measure it, or if people want website hits, they want dollars in the bank, they want how many wells we've drilled and so on, how many children have we affected. But the sense, I haven't finished the book yet, but the sense I'm getting is that that's not necessarily what would be meaningful to you guys.
No, yeah, we're much more interested in, can we sort of tell the story of the world that people are living in? Can we build them up as fully fleshed out people, human beings that are doing the work? So, the numbers tend to make it easier to understand, especially if you can't, conceptualize the work being done in Haiti. A number maybe is easier to say, yes, this is working. No, that's not working. But I think the stories are more compelling, and also, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. No, yeah. Well, make it more compelling was
Yeah.
I mean, was that sort of the line of thinking around that? I mean, I love the way you say in the where are we here? You talk about ordinary people. I mean, and those ordinary people that you met when you were traveling with your parents are actually quite extraordinary.
Right.
And it's that narrative, right? That I think anyway that's ultimately so life-changing and compelling.
Well, the numbers also, strip away any sort of nuance or
right.
You only get the information that you're counting, and that leaves out sort of the fullness of the work.
Is that kind of how we're wired? I've never been a fan of that kind of that phrase. It's a little too deterministic for me. It's all planned out. But do we like numbers? I mean, is that when it comes to development, do we need them? Do donors need them? Might be the better question.
Well, I think we do overall like order or being able to categorize things. I think a lot of people are clumpers in that way to like,
right.
So I understand these things. Let's put them in categories.
Sure. Yep.
And so that again, that makes it sort of easier to understand if I know how to put them in boxes. And I know that the push to have numbers is a huge pressure for organizations, especially smaller organizations like Spirit in Action, that the evaluation using numbers can be a huge amount of time and money to do baseline surveys and follow up with data and number crunching. And I find that for the donors that really stick with Spirit in Action, they like the stories. They like how that brings the work to life, actually. And that, some people maybe stop giving because they can't see our, 2-year out numbers or whatever. But a lot of people, when they hear the story of this person's life was changed
right.
this way, and sort of being able to relate to it, like they can now not sleep on the floor, they're sleeping on a bed, like that is maybe different, not a number, but it's something that everyone can understand.
Well, it's interesting you bring up bed, because I was going to ask you about mattresses and why they're important to solving some of the world's biggest problems.
Yeah, so we had one essay by Sasha Rabzi, I think that was in her essay, about mattresses in dorm rooms for girls, keeping them in school, rather than having to go home between different classes, or if they weren't going to be safe at home, having that mattress available for them to stay made a difference. And I think that sort of may be surprising. What what Smart Risk's book pulls out is that someone who always sleeps on a mattress and is comfortable may not think, what about this aspect of development? So from an outsider perspective, we might not know that that's a priority for a girl to go to school. You might think, well, she needs transportation to school or a school building or a teacher, and that the mattress could make a difference is something that we can learn when we listen to grassroots leaders on the ground.
It's in chapter 12 of your book, Smart Risks, and let's put a little plug in here right now for you, smartrisks.org. It's plural. You can learn more about the authors and the site there and purchase it as well. So chapter 12 is small grants as seed funding for entrepreneurs, but what I love is the chapter, or the heading, would you consider mattresses innovative? And I'm just going to read a little section here. Often what's considered innovative in global development, quote, is what's new, the latest idea or product as in the private sector. But what if innovative simply meant including previously excluded people in decision-making and accountability mechanisms? What if innovation were found in the individual and collective reflection processes that people use to identify and overcome obstacles, resulting in changes or adaptations in people's work on the ground, close quote. That's innovative. Basically seeing and listening to others.
Yeah. You'd be surprised that that's, the innovation is listen, but
right.
that kind of is the message.
Yeah, and these just to sort of refer back, these are the ordinary people you're talking about.
Yeah.
These are the folks that actually have access to the solutions.
Exactly. We may not know outside what the top priority is, but when you ask, you can get some perhaps surprising and perhaps more effective solutions. Do you
would you say, Spirit in Action, you, Jennifer, the work you've done over the years, would you say you're all about sort of bottom-up development, that grassroots kind of approach, or is there a place for top-down as well? Is it either or? Is it both and? Do we need to meet in the middle? What's your sense there?
I think that the answer is different for different scales. With Spirit in Action, our grants are small. We give between $100 and $5,000. And so for us to then aim at, changing the way that the Malawian government is, distributing food aid, that's not going to be, we're not going to make a dent there.
Right.
But because we are working on that smaller level, we then have the opportunity to reach the people that, those individuals in the rural community that the big government program cannot reach because of their big structure. So I think that there is room for both, and especially the bigger scale projects that move beyond the capital, but move to the different areas that are further out. Programs that help spread the larger infrastructure setups for maybe electricity. That's something that needs to be coordinated centrally, and also, schools. That's something that the government can control for the whole country, and then the work of maybe these foundations like Spirit in Action and the other ones featured in the book are about, how do we complement that civil society? How do we sort of work with that rather than, letting governments off the hook,
right.
but address what's being missed.
In the introduction to your book, you talk a little bit about old school approaches in international aid and philanthropy. Could you talk about that a bit? What is an old school approach, and is there light at the end of the tunnel for you guys?
Yeah, I think the old school approach is very much. I am a organization in the U.S. I'm going to take people and I'm going to fly them to Uganda, and they're going to bring their equipment with them and implement something that they think is going to work.
Right.
So here, this is how we do it in the U.S. Let me bring this and plop this down in the middle of Uganda. And we are going to spend a lot of money doing it because, we want to make sure that all the numbers are in place that people are going to look at. And, so it's just very big structure and done from the top down, from outside the country. And then also, things that don't take into consideration local economies, that are really centralized rather than dispersed or only go to the same, target areas. And I think with our book, we're trying to point to the light at the end of the tunnel. And some students at the new school who are in critical philanthropy class, they read our book last spring. And they said that after a year of reading about all the problems in philanthropy today, that our book sort of was a breath of fresh air of hope for,
oh, nice.
Yes, there is a good way to, it is possible to use money to help people. It's just that we have to, get out of the way. We have to be willing
Right.
to listen, be willing to think of mattresses as innovation.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was speaking to, now I think it might have been a former student of mine. I teach at one course a year at Humber College in Toronto in the International Development Program, and I get to them by the third term, which is their last term, usually about 60, 65 students. And what I found is there's a real, some would call it realism, I suppose, but a real deep cynicism, I think, to, oh boy, are we screwed. Why did I even get into this program? My marks aren't going to matter because I'm moving into another field. I'm going to go into banking. I think I think I could change the world there, So, but I think for some reason, academics and sometimes practitioners have this way of squeezing that kind of passion and sense of hope out of students, which I've found quite, it's not even just ironic, it's kind of tragic.
Right. Yeah, you want people to go out armed with knowledge and still that sort of positive outlook and possibility. So that they have energy to continue doing the work, because it's not like it's easy.
Well, it's so not easy, and yet no one ever said it was going to be easy. Right. It's just, I think we're still trying to figure out what are the best ways to end some of these, as you guys say, some of the world's biggest problems in your subtitle in the book. How would you define? I mean, we talked about mattresses, obviously, and small loans and things like that. How would you define a smart risk? Is it entirely driven by context, or funding? How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's sort of, I think, a combination of the risk can be, we have this money, how are we going to risk spending it? And so the smart risk is, this is, a good investment in what we're hoping to do. And what we're talking about in the book is that the smart risk is based on the grassroots initiatives. It's based on local leaders. It's responsive to the needs of the community. And then for the funding model, it's also, the smart risk is also not just one grant that you get one time and then, we're not going to fund you again, but it's more, let's give funding over a number of years so that you can get established. Let's support the overhead of the grassroots organization, maybe pay for their electricity and internet costs for a year so that they can be a successful organization. And, that's not maybe appealing to someone who's like, I can buy X number of bed nets, but the bed nets do have to be distributed somehow, and that overhead can make or break a program. If it doesn't have any overhead, the thing, bed nets are going to sit in one place until you can pay someone to distribute them. So I think the smart risk is looking at ways to be more effective by allowing the needs of the community and the leadership of the community to come through, and really trusting that that power and knowledge at the local level.
While you were piecing the book together, I mean, you talked a little bit about hope and your students and breath of fresh air and so on. Do you think that's actually happening at the multi and bilateral level, when we're talking about the World Banks and the IMFs in the world and the larger agencies? Is it going on? Is there a shift occurring?
It's hard to know, because there are lots of initiatives that say, oh yeah, we're community led, community focused.
Right.
And then it's hard to know what that actually means.
What does it actually mean? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think for those biggest organizations, promoting people who are on the ground, if they're to have access to small funds, to maybe be able to give a few $100 grant, if they're a Peace Corps worker, if they can have a little bit of discretion over funds. I think that they can invest in the local leaders. I think that both keeps them encouraged to continue the work, and can start to build up more, base for rolling out the work. So I don't know how much is happening yet, but we certainly continue to be hopeful about it.
Right. Well, I mean, isn't that partially what you're trying to do with this book? And some
Yeah, we're hoping that even if it doesn't reach the top, that maybe it'll reach someone who can start thinking of maybe the middle management, maybe the lower employee who just says, you know what, I'm going to start thinking about this and start talking about this in a new way.
Is it fair to say, and as like I said, I haven't finished the book, but is it fair to say that every chapter starts with a story?
Yes, yeah, we made sure to work with each author to include a story, include names and setting, and just try to get a feel for the work and to help readers connect with the stories. That was intentional.
And I mean, I think what's beautiful about that too is it just so humanizes all that we're trying to do, all that you guys are trying to do, and validates the other in a way that, the capital O on other,
Mm-hmm.
I think it absolutely is the way forward, and also makes for a much more interesting and fun read. Where does trust fit into all of this?
Yeah, trust is sort of that human quality that we put in the place of numbers.
Mm.
So it's, again, if we're not going to be able to go off of just this is working because there's the numbers to prove it. The trust is, we are going to invest in the long term here, and we are going to sort of work with you to have the tools, and then, we're trusting you to do the work, and they're trusting us to continue to support them. And I think that mutual trust then can build a better relationship that then allows that work to go forward in the best way. If there's no trust, then maybe foundations are constantly asking for more reports, and maybe the people on the ground spend then most of their time working on reports rather than going house to house, talking to the women, saying, hey, how's it going? Let me check in with you.
Yes, meeting deadlines rather than actually doing development work.
Yeah. That personal development work takes time. And, when I was in Malawi, we were meeting with people and talking about long-term goals for this cooperative that I wrote about in the book. And they are saying, well, of course, we're all farmers too, so we can't work on that in the next few months because, that's harvest season. But after that, we'll get to it. It's like, oh, yeah, this this is all going on at the same time.
Right.
Especially if the overhead is not covered, so they are working for a living and then also working for the development of their community.
So I think Jennifer wrote a chapter in here, and she talks about experts. I mean, really, the reality is what you're trying to say is that the experts are already on the ground.
Oh yeah, yeah. And when I go to Malawi and Kenya, that's sort of reassuring because I'm not an expert, and it's sort of when I meet people who can tell me about the context of the work and tell me how they're planning to address it, it's reassuring to know that there are people who have ideas, and I just need to, I can invest in that. They're doing the work anyway,
right?
And we have the opportunity to sort of to boost that along. But it's absolutely true that there are experts and there are ideas, and coming in from outside, especially someone who hasn't spent, a whole lot of time in a different culture or in that particular culture, it's just, you can be missing all sorts of clues about how things might work on the ground rather than in the bubble of wherever it was designed.
Do you think that the inability to see that expertise on the ground, the inability to listen, the inability to occlude and to see the other as human,
Mm-hmm.
as man, woman, boy, and girl, and so on, is that? Do you think it's arrogance? Is it just is it paternalism? Is it just the way this is how we've grown up? We've got the answers. 2 + 2 = 4. It's back to the numbers thing, or is there something else going on there?
I think that a lot of it is stereotypes.
Right.
I mean, what do we hear about other cultures? That they, in Africa particularly, that it's one big homogeneous group and they all need help. That's kind of, what we hear. And rather than realizing that, they have parent-teacher organizations just like we have them in Canada and the U.S. So I think, and then of course, if you're working with a language barrier, then it can make it very difficult to get full ideas across, and so things become simplified, and that can sort of reduce the expertise, their ability to convey expertise to an outsider who's speaking comfortably in their own language. I really saw how the language barrier can reduce that level of conversation.
I love the fact that one of the second, I think, or third last chapters is called "What Happens When We Listen."
Mm-hmm.
There's a something I underlined. He talks about the process of reflection, of silence, and then a call to collective good, which I think is just a marvelous turn of phrase. Tell me, we're gonna have to wrap it up here in a few minutes, but can we kind of I don't know, come full circle, put a couple, we don't have to put a period on this because this truly is a dialogue, this truly is a conversation, as you kind of lay out so beautifully in the book with each chapter. Tell me about the Grassroots Manifesto.
Grassroots Manifesto is really that we all have these qualities to we can all work at the grassroots level, and it is this call to work with grassroots organizations, to think long term, to invest in that the overhead and get comfortable with listening and with not being the expert.
I love it. So I think you've got 5 at the end of the book. Lead by following. I love to build trust like it's your job, and then in brackets because it is. Remove barriers, large and small. Build skills for the long haul, and then the last one, risk has 2 sides, and get comfortable with both.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one solution, right?
No. In fact, thinking that there is one solution is part of the problem.
It's part of the problem. Nice. That sort of kind of brings us back almost full circle in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, and let me just throw out some numbers because
Yeah.
we're talking about that.
Yeah, go.
Just that we have 22 authors that are part of this project from 20 organizations.
Wow, okay.
30 essays. So we represent a huge sector, a huge, swath of international development. And, Spirit in Action focuses on Africa, but there are also stories from Southeast Asia, from Latin America, India. So it covers, again, a lot of sections of the world. And, these are all organizations of different sizes. Spirit in Action, with me just as the only employee, is probably one of the smallest. And then Global Fund for Women is one of the biggest. So we really tried to get a whole broad perspective. And it started as a project for people who wanted to reflect on their work. So again, bringing it full circle is that we started because we wanted to be better grassroots grant makers, living up to that manifesto. And then this book is sort of the culmination of that.
Do you want to, just as we wrap up, do you want to talk a little bit more about Spirit in Action? And by the way, folks, it's smartrisks.org, and the book is called Smart Risks. We're talking with Tanya Cothron today about development and all kinds of things, but most importantly about their new book, Smart Risks. What you want to just wrap us up here on the conversation with Spirit in Action?
Sure.
And actually, I think the question I really want to know is, why are you now living in Toronto and not in California? I think that's the question we need an answer to, Tanya.
Yeah, so it's Spirit in Action International in spiritinaction.org in California. And I live in Toronto. My partner teaches at York University, so that's why I moved here.
Oh, okay.
And luckily, all the work is on the African continent, so it's sort of just, again, a testament to we're not coming from one place and implementing another. I'm working from here because all of our partners are the experts on the ground, and we work with people in Malawi, Uganda, and Kenya, and I'm really just the facilitator for the work that they're doing, and I facilitate an interface between the small cooperative of farmers and the schools and, women's groups in those countries, and then our supporters and donors in California and across the U.S.
Right.
So luckily with the internet these days and WhatsApp, you can do just about anything.
It's true. It's true. One of the benefits of globalization. The book is Smart Risks, the subtitle, How Small Grants Are Helping to Solve Some of the World's Biggest Problems. Jennifer Lentfer and Tanya Cothron has been our guest here today, talking about the book, but also about Smart Risks. Tanya, thanks a lot for your time today. I really appreciate it. Look forward to maybe doing a part 2 down the road. And is there a part 2 to the book in the works?
Not yet. We're just still trying to promote this book.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just came out, didn't it?
It did. It came out in May in the U.S. And Canada, and there's an ebook version as well.
Nice.
So, we're just trying to work on promotion now. In fact, I am tentatively planning a Toronto book launch in September, so I'll give you
please do
about that too.
Yeah, we'll keep people posted about it. Well, listen, thanks a lot for your time today, Tanya. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was really great to talk to you.